Hey everyone, what's up? Welcome to TV Guys. I'm Matt.
I'm Brian, and we're here bringing you the ultimate Office rewatch podcast just for you.
What? I have no idea. I have no frame of reference for what you're doing right now.
Wait, so we're not going to give them exclusive behind the scenes stories that only two people who were there can give them?
Are you talking about the podcast with Angela and Pam?
Yeah, that's the intro to the Office Ladies podcast. I thought we could do it here too.
We can't because first of all, I'm not on the same page. Secondly, I'm not a lady. Thirdly, I wasn't on The Office.
I suppose that just put a little bit of a wrench in the plan. It's all right. We'll have fast facts and deep dives in this episode too.
Both of them, yes. You've got so you gave me a warning you're going to do something. I had no idea what you're doing, and now I'm confused. I'm still confused even after you've explained it to me.
I basically just verbatim said the intro that they do on their podcast.
No, I get that. Well, we're not their podcast. We are our podcast. And we were texting the other day, and before we do all of our stuff, I wanted to hear because you said that you had finished your run of Firefly, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but I just want to get your broad strokes, your feelings about Firefly.
I like it. I think I haven't seen the movie yet. So I think the reason that a lot of people might want to have another season or want it to be revived is because they left a lot on the table. Like they waited the whole season until the very end to do anything interesting with River. And then they did a really good episode at the end with her, and then they just dropped it.
Yeah.
I feel like only about half the characters they even explored to a good extent.
The movie does a really good job without ruining anything. The movie does a really good job of exploring River and the things that happen to her and a lot of the question marks that the TV show raise. I'll warn you ahead of time. It does not do a great job of explaining and diving into Shepard's past because they do a lot of like hinting throughout the show of like, oh, what's going on with his past? And then the movie kind of is like, you know what? I don't have to explain it to you. So, but I mean, it's fine. Like everything else gets wrapped up. That's like the one thing. It's kind of like when we were talking about Lost of like, the Walt stuff. This is Shepard is Firefly's Walt, where it's like, you could do a little bit more, but we get the general gist of what was going on. We don't know every piece of it, but we get that you had a past and it involved the Alliance. That's all we get.
And I'm sure they would have explored it more if they had more seasons, but I mean, it is what it is.
Exactly. They cleared up everything else that I think they needed to clear up from the TV show. All of the question marks there. They brought a good little bow on everything except for that, and it makes sense that you can't do everything.
Yeah, that's true. You know, Matt, I made a discovery this past week. Turns out that internet companies prefer it when you pay your bill.
No way.
Yeah, because my debit card expired in January and I got a new one, and I never thought to update the auto pay on our internet bill. And so we never paid attention. And then all of a sudden, like last week, we got a notice in the mail saying, you haven't paid your bill in 4 months, so pay us or we're going to cut off your internet.
I was going to say, does that have something to do with your internet being as crappy as it is when we're recording? But that's probably not it.
No, that's the area. However, we're in the process of moving, and I think we will have better internet, hopefully, when we move.
Yeah. So real quick, before we jump into other stuff, speaking of cutting off phone bills and everything, I was helping out someone at the bank and he was trying to activate his debit card and he kept calling. And for us, we can't activate it right there in front of you. You have to call the number. So I'm like, well, you can at least sit down and call him in front of me. So if you have questions, I can answer them. So he's calling him and he's like, they want a service plan for $45 for a month. I'm like, no, that's not us. Like, what do you, and so like, it was hard enough to get him to dial the phone number to begin with. Cause like, he'd be like 1-800. He's like 1808. Like, no, it's right there in front of you. Can you not read? Yeah. Coming to find out 30 minutes of helping him. I'm like, all right, just put it on speakerphone because, you know, I didn't have him do speakerphone at first because there's other people around. I didn't want everyone to know his PIN number. So he puts on speakerphone now that there's no one else around. And I'm listening to it. I'm like, this isn't our stuff. And I realize this guy hasn't paid his phone bill. He doesn't have an active cell phone service. So he's getting this automated message that is like, you need to reactivate with Straight Talk and then pay $45. And so I'm like, well, no wonder. Plus, he can't pay that because the debit card he wants to pay it with is right in front of us, unactive. So I'm like, well, pay with your credit card.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's my work life. That's how things go. But hey, we're not here to talk about our boring adult problems. We're here to talk about a time when things were a lot nicer and a lot less complicated, and we can just sit in front of the TV and turn on Doug and watch it and be like, I connect with this guy.
Yeah, I like Doug.
I do like Doug.
And Doug goes along with all of my picks. All also had movies with them too.
Okay, so hit me with one of your picks. Hit me with something that you're like, this is a top tier show that I used to watch when I was a kid.
All right, I will hit you with a top tier show, The Rugrats, or just Rugrats. And yes, I have changed my background to a Rugrats background, and I've come prepared with all of my picks.
Only you would have like several visual gags to bring to an audio recording of a podcast.
Like, I wouldn't. I don't even have to mention it. Yeah, this could have just been for you, but I don't know. I thought I meant yes. Behind me is the cast of Rugrats. I loved this growing up. So we got cable. I think when I was like 10 or 11. Earlier than that, we didn't have it. So we didn't have Nickelodeon, but I would always go to the video store and rent those bright orange VHS tapes that had like 3 or 4 Rugrats episodes on them, and I would watch those all the time. And I don't know. I like the style, like the animation style and the comedy. I don't know what it is, but did you ever watch Rugrats?
I did. I watched Rugrats a lot. I remember a certain amount of like very specific episodes, but one thing I remember the most is the grandpa and like kind of the dark humor he had. And you revisit it now, and some of the jokes he made, you're like, why would you put this in a kids show?
Yeah, in the Rugrats movie, they say, "Why would you put him in?" The mom is saying, "Why did you put him in charge? He slept through Pearl Harbor." And he goes, "Well, I sounded the alarm as soon as I could." Like that's
there was there was another joke about him like playing Russian roulette in the war that they had on this show, and it's like, when you haven't played Russian roulette before, have you?
And then there's another episode where Grandpa Lou is like, "Oh, voluptuous space fixins. That's for after you kids go to bed." It's like, this is in. These are jokes are in plain sight for kids to watch, but I don't know. I just think the quality of Rugrats was really good, and I thought all 3 of their movies. And I have a 3-pack of the DVD of their movies: the Rugrats movie, Rugrats in Paris, and the Rugrats Meet the Thornberries, or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
That was those were, I don't know, it all holds up because they all have their own unique personalities. A lot of times with these shows, it's just like, oh, kids are just kids. Well, no, you have, Phil and Lil are the weird ones who like to eat bugs, and Chucky's the nervous, anxious redhead, like me, and then Tommy's the leader, and Angelica's the brat. Like they all have their thing.
Yeah, I really liked too. I liked the characters. Even Phil and Lil together, like even though they were twins and identical twins at that, they still had enough distinct personality that they were 2 distinct characters, and that's hard to do when you're writing twins, especially twins that are infants.
Mm-hmm. And voiced by the same person.
And that too. I really like what they did with the parents too. Like I liked, we talk about representation every now and then, but this was a show that in the 90s, early 90s, like did something that I didn't see a whole lot of on TV or in other media, like where they had unique families. Like Angelica's mom was the breadwinner. She was the like, I'm the working stiff. I'm going to make all the money. I'm going to be, and to an extreme where it's like, I'm too busy for my family sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Usually you see that with the dad. The dad's the one who I have to make all this money, but they were able to do that role reversal, which really worked for the show. And they didn't, they didn't pat themselves on the back. They weren't virtue signaling or anything like that. It's like, this is just a reality for this character. And I really liked that they had some very fleshed out parents as well as the kids.
Exactly. Like they did. Also, I mean, because Tommy's the main character, his dad also was like, he's following his creative passions of being this toy designer, but he's also kind of like the absent-minded professor where he builds a bunch of stuff, but they always seem to go wrong. And he just kind of has that wacky charisma to him.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, do you know, I'm moving over, Susie, do you know who did the voice of her dad?
I don't.
Shepherd Book himself, Ron Glass.
Nice. That makes sense. Ron Glass, he's popped up in a number of shows along the years, and I was I just blanked on what I was going to bring up. Because I mean, he was in like Barney Miller way back in the day, but
Mm-hmm.
there was another show like of our childhood, and I was going to bring up. He had a recurring guest spot, and I can't remember what that was. So too bad you guys don't get to know.
Yeah, and I think all the movies did a really good job of introducing new characters. Like the first movie introduced, Dill, Tommy's little brother, and then he kept on the show. And then they introduced Kimmy when Chucky's dad got married in Paris, and that was
Mhm.
cool too. That was probably one of the, not the first, but it's a cartoon show that had an interracial step marriage, which is kind of progressive for that show.
Yeah. Yeah, I never saw the movie. I saw the first movie, like bits and pieces of it, and I finally have probably seen all of it together, but I haven't seen any of the other movies. I think they came out at a time I was growing out of Rugrats.
Mm-hmm. I tended to stay on stuff a little longer than I probably should have, but and one last thing I liked about Rugrats was a lot of the episodes were because I mean they're kids, they don't really understand what's going on. We see them going through this like fantastical adventure where they're like out in the mountains or they're in the jungle. Then whenever you cut back to reality, you see it from the reality perspective. They're just in the backyard, and it's kind of cool how they're creative. Like, well, what is this big obstacle they're feeling facing? What is it in real life? Is it just like a fence, or is it the dog? Like, you got to realize what is it that we're seeing, and what is it that their reality is.
Yeah. I would say that before these guys came along, Calvin and Hobbes, the comic strip, did that super well. And
Oh
like
yeah,
I really appreciated Calvin and Hobbes for the way that they would do that. And so Rugrats adapted that and they brought it to their world too.
definitely.
And even now, actually, even now, like Toy Story does that too. Like every Toy Story starts off with that sort of world, and then the Toy Story 3 like takes it to the extreme of like, well, this is really what you see. Toy Story 1 and 2, you see him playing, but you only see it with the toys. And Toy Story 3 is like, well, let's just throw you in that world. Let's throw you into a kid's brain. And that was such a great opening to a movie. So I do love when movies do that and they get to show you the kid's imagination.
Mm-hmm. That is really cool. All right, Matt, what is one of yours?
So I'm going to stick with Nickelodeon because like I've got pockets of stuff that I would watch. And so Nickelodeon, there's a lot of shows I could talk about. I don't know if any of these on your list, but I'm just going to throw a passing mention at shows just to trigger that sweet nostalgia dopamine.
Go for it.
Shows that I watch like All That. I
Yep,
watched Kenan and Kel. I watched
absolutely.
some of the animated ones like Our Real Monsters
Yep.
and of course Rugrats here. I even watched like really old, like at the very outset of Nickelodeon, some of like Nickelodeon's first shows that were so awesome, like You Can't Say That on Television
Mm-hmm.
or Wild and Crazy Kids. But I really loved Double Dare.
Oh
That
yeah.
was my favorite game show as a kid, and I loved watching that. But I'm going to land here. This is where I'm landing. Is Are You Afraid of the Dark? When I was a
Mm-hmm.
kid, I was not able to watch these shows because they were too scary. They were like grown up levels scary for a kids television show.
Yeah.
I haven't back them, but if my nightmares are any indication of how I remember them, then yeah, these are still pretty scary. Would I would imagine, and so I remember like as you're talking about Paramount Plus and they've got all these Nickelodeon shows, and I'm like that would only be worth it to me. I want to watch Are You Afraid of the Dark now as an adult, and I want to see these stories because I remember some of those that are like they're ingrained in my mind. There's an episode that you guys might be familiar with. Like this kid got a comic book and it's got like this jester on the comic book or something like that. And he spills on it and he's like, he needs to dry it off. So what he does is he throws it into a microwave and like the jester comes alive out of it and like breaks the microwave. And so like all these people in his life are like taken over by this jester and it eventually got to a point like in the episode where it got too scary for me that I turned it off. So I have no idea how that episode ended because I got freaked out so much. So that was the power of this show. Did you ever watch it?
I watched it on and off. I didn't watch it as consistently. I did look. It is on Paramount Plus.
I figured it would be.
Yeah, and that was kind of like that and Goosebumps were like the two like scary ones. I think parents, as a parent myself, my main thing would be like, if it's gonna give my kids nightmares, they're gonna get up and have to deal with it. Then I don't want them to watch it. But other than that, like it's nothing completely gory, or because it's still like kid level. You know what I mean? It's not like you're watching Saw, but it is still really creepy because, especially as kids, you're putting yourself in the situation. It's like, crap. Though, what if that happens to me?
Yeah. See, Goosebumps was great in the term of the actual story itself probably wasn't too scary, but R.L. Stein knew how to end a story. And
Mm,
so he'd end every single Goosebumps story or episode with like this twist of, oh, that's really the horror of the whole story is how it
mm,
ends here. And it leaves you unsettled because you're not resolved with the conflict. Now all of a sudden it's like he introduces this last bit of conflict, and you're like, this is freaking me out, man. You're gonna
yeah,
leave me with that. So he
like
did a great job there.
yeah, like you wrap it up with a bow, but then you keep it going a little bit longer, and just introduce something that's never going to be mentioned again.
Yeah, like for instance, the that one librarian guy that like was an alien or a monster or something like that, and no one would believe this girl that the librarian was a monster, and so eventually, like her parents, you find out at the end of the episode, her parents invite the librarian over because like the daughter was being quote unquote rude to him, and she's like, well, we want to make amends. We brought him over for dinner. So it comes to the house, and you're like, how's this going to end? The parents don't know he's in the house. And so the librarian's there, and he's like, well, what's for dinner? And the parents go, you are. And then like they show their mouse, and like they're monsters themselves, and they eat the librarian in front of the daughter, and like the daughter finds out she's actually a daughter of monsters. And
Wow.
that's where the episode ends. And you're like, what are you doing? Why are you introducing these concepts into our brain? We're five.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I still like when they go for the creativity.
Yeah. Yep. I agree.
All right. Another big one for me was Recess. Did you ever watch Recess?
I didn't. That was one of those shows that people liked, and I never got into.
So basically, it's about these kids in school, and obviously it's about recess, and it's like it's just kind of like kids being kids throughout the school, and recess is like their kingdom. This is where they get to be themselves, and it's this main group of six characters. I'm trying to think. Oh, there you can see all of them. And the thing is that these are six kids that would not be like friends in real life. You have Vince the jock. You have Gus the pipsqueak military kid. Yeah, Mikey, the big sensitive one. You got Spinelli, the Tom girl, and you got Gretchen, the nerdy smart one, and then you got TJ in the front, the kid with the hat, and he's kind of like their leader. He's not the smartest, strongest, fastest, toughest of any of them, but he's just got the charisma, and he's like the glue that holds them all together. And it's like their group is kind of like Rugrats. They all have their own specific personalities, but they're all there for each other. Like they don't. You might think, oh, the Tom girl's gonna make fun of the nerdy girl. Like no, they're part of the same friend group. Like they all have each other's back. And there's this whole wide range of supporting characters. You have the Diggers, which are two kids who literally just dig holes all the time. And you have King Bob, who's like the king of recess, and he sits on top of the playground and rules over everything. And it's just they've built their own little mini society within recess. And then the bell rings, they go back to class. And it's just kind of interesting how they can confined their whole world into this like half-hour segment of the day.
That's a cool concept of what you get to be and what you get to do outside of the responsibilities you have. And I'm sure that was a huge influence on like Phineas and Ferb,
Oh,
because
probably.
Phineas
Oh,
and
yeah,
Ferb
definitely.
is a lot of this is the outside of school,
Mm-hmm.
who do you get to be? What's the creativity that you choose?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the first movie, I think there's a couple of them, but it's called Recess School's Out. I think your kids would probably like it. At least the older ones would like it. I mean, the plot is unrealistic. It's about the evil villain who's trying to get rid of recess across the country. But I don't know. I liked it a lot. I remember when the movie came out, I rented it I was like 13. I rented it from the video store again with a VHS tape because we're showing our age here. And my sister was dating her old boyfriend from high school at the time, and I was like, I'm gonna watch the Recess movie. Do you guys want to watch it? And her boyfriend's like, yeah, let's watch it. And she's like, I can't believe I'm watching a Recess cartoon movie with my little brother. Like,
Poor Laura.
yeah.
I find it funny, like, because I look at this show, or I look at Rugrats, or I look at, I don't know if you are going to bring it up in this, but you've brought it up before, but Power Rangers and like shows that you loved. And it's funny to see like the ensemble cast of multiple different people and all like the friendship that they have, and like seeing the sort of shows that you like. It's really funny and really telling of I mean, it fits your personality completely. Like you are
Yeah.
a team guy. You're like I love to be parts of teams that we all rock.
All right.
Kind of like us. We're part of a team together, you and me.
Yep. Whenever we can schedule the podcast.
We'll never get around to it. Oh, it's me. I get a pick. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll stick with cartoons then because, again, I'm going to throw a couple titles at you and I'm going to land on one.
Gotcha.
When I was a kid, one of my favorite times was I loved the Saturday morning cartoons, and I'd watch those on Kids WB. And so there's a lot of Kids WB shows that I could go over. Like, well, oh, I'm sorry. I was about to name some Fox Kids. So it started off when I was younger. It was Fox Kids. So like I loved, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego and
Yep.
X-Men and the '90s Spider-Man cartoon, which I just finished rewatching that on Disney Plus because I'm like, I haven't seen this since I was 8. And they did a deep dive of the comic books, by the way, with that Spider-Man cartoon, because they didn't just stop at like their villains. They did like a Secret Wars storyline. They brought in Iron Man at a certain point. They brought in X-Men. They brought in Doctor Strange.
Wow.
They had like the B level side of all these superheroes, and you didn't expect that from Spider-Man, but they turned it into like a full Marvel universe in the '90s, and I had not remembered how much that they did that with, even though it got canceled, and then it got left on like this cliffhanger where Mary Jane's lost in time, but whatever. So then as I got older, I jumped over to WB Kids, and some shows I really loved in there. Here's where I'm going to land is on Jackie Chan Adventures. Did you ever watch that?
I haven't. This is my turn to shut up while you tell me about Jackie Chan Adventures.
Jackie Chan Adventures was such an awesome show. They didn't get Jackie Chan to voice himself, even though they got like a guy who sounded a lot like him. They would have Jackie at the beginning or at the end of every episode, like answering a letter to fans. But through the show it was Jackie, and like he has his niece Jade and his grandfather, and they're all like, his grandfather is really big into like mysticism, the Eastern Chinese mysticism, and so he knows about like this dragon that has been dormant for all these years, and he had these like 8 talismans that gave him power, and he was ruling all of China, and then these like warriors took these talismans out of him, took the powers, they divided up all these powers, so all the talismans have different powers. And the first season is them collecting these 8 talismans while they're trying to stay ahead of these bad guys who are trying to collect them and make the dragon to rule China and like give them that ruling authority. And so each of the episodes was so much fun because they get there and they grab a talisman and they finally catch up to it. And then you learn, oh, this is what this talisman did. Mm-hmm. So the first season was learning all these different talisman powers. And then the seasons after that was them being able to use those talismans and all the different, they actually ended up having to fight these other demons apart from that dragon demon that they were trying to fight in the first season. So as it went on, it was just a lot of fun. They had some great characters. You got to see some villains become heroes. And you got to see they did really great with the characters, and they did some really unique stuff. And it was just so intriguing as a kid, especially even that, like I said, that first season felt like a video game where it's like, I have to collect all of these collectibles and let's see what happens when that happens. So,
well, I kind of like shows to do that. It's kind of like the ongoing MacGuffin, where there's always something to grab. There's always something to collect, and it keeps you engaged. Because if they bring it up enough, like, oh, when are they going to get the next one? When do they get this one? Especially when you said there's a finite one, you can keep track. Like, oh, once they hit 4, okay, we're halfway there. And I think it's a smart way. It can be overdone, but it's a smart way for shows to keep you engaged.
Yeah, and the show, like the first and second season, both of them, they had those MacGuffins every single episode, and the third season had a little bit of that. And there was like the fourth season that they tried something different, and I don't feel like it worked at that point. I just liked early on when let's collect all these things and let's keep the world from falling apart one step at a time, all that sort of stuff. So they did that really well.
Matt, I think you know me too well because you already predicted what my last one is, which is Power Rangers.
I figured that was going to be coming up.
It had to, because when you look at the facts of this show, it's crazy bonkers that it became as big as it was. I think I mentioned this on the podcast a long time ago, but just I'll kind of give the Cliff Notes version. I could do a whole podcast about this whole system, but Power Rangers was not original to the US. It was a show called Super Sentai in Japan. They'd been doing it since the 70s. And Saban basically bought the rights to the footage so he could make a super cheap TV show, because all he had to do was loop over all the Power Rangers stuff and then film half a TV show, because all this that's when they cast Tommy and Jason and Billy and Kimberly and all them, and they filmed that part of it, so they could film like 12 minutes of an episode, do multiple in a row, and you have footage for like 60 episodes. That's all it was going to be. And they didn't realize at first how big of a hit this was going to be. They were going to do some event in LA where there's a kind of a meeting with fans, and it was supposed to be just like one show for however many people, but people flocked to it so much that like shut down the freeway, and like all the merchandise was sold out, and people were furious they weren't able to get all their Power Rangers merchandise because they were just overwhelmed with how many people came out. And the cast itself were like, holy crap, like we're like legit celebrities, what is this? And that's when they realized, oh, okay, we actually got something here. They thought it was just going to be some little cult classic with some Japanese monster footage on top of it.
I want to get paid more than $12 an hour now. I didn't realize people like this so much.
Well, yeah, it actually. So these three are over my shoulder, the red, yellow, and black ones. They tried that. They said, hey, how about we make some more money? And they were like, you're fired. And that's why in the second season, those three go off to a peace conference, whatever that is. And then suddenly three new kids who happen to be wearing red, yellow, and black show up, and they happen to be great at martial arts. It's like, what a great coincidence and timing that was.
This is amazing. It's like having a band. I just fired my drummer and I got a brand new drummer who's just in the same level.
Exactly.
Great job.
It's kind of like Recess and Rugrats too. I keep bringing up this theme. They all have their own different styles, which my favorite part of the episodes was always outside of the Zords and the fighting was when you actually got to see the characters be themselves, especially when they were fighting the putties, because normally they would have an unmorphed fight where it's just them showing off their skills fighting, the putties, and then later on they'd come back with a real monster and they'd have to morph. But I always liked seeing their individual styles of fighting. Like Zach was always like the dance fighter, and Kimberly did gymnastics, and then Tommy would just go yeah as he fight it every time.
And he's still doing that today.
Oh yeah, he built his whole career is based off of, hey, I was in Power Rangers, which I mean, I'm not knocking him. It works for him.
Yeah, I mean, if you were in Power Rangers, would you stop talking about it?
Yeah. Well, and actually so he was only going to be in Power Rangers for a little while because in the Japanese version, the Green Ranger actually died. And that's why eventually they ran out of footage. And that's why they had to bring him in back as a White Ranger, because they were running out of Green Ranger footage. But they were going to have Tommy, Jason David Frank, go off and do another show and have bring in a different guy. But people were like, parents were writing in like, my kid's so depressed because Tommy's not on Power Rangers anymore. You got to bring Tommy back. You got to bring Tommy back. And so they're like, okay, so let's just switch it. So then they gave the other guy, the new guy, they switched it. They just gave him the other show. They brought Tommy back as the White Ranger because he was such a phenomenon with Power Rangers. Even though I myself was more of a Jason and Billy fan.
Yeah. I don't remember. I knew because I was in first grade when I was like big into this, and I think I was done with it by like third grade.
Okay.
So I don't remember it super well, but I do remember I watched a lot of Power Rangers. I remember people talking about it. I remember all the merchandise that like kids would have and bring like their own like morphing ring things to school, whatever badges, I don't know, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Bring those, or like you would get to be able to buy the 5 set of Megazords, and then you could put them all together into the giant one.
I still have the Megazord, like the real. It comes as 5 different Zords. You can put it together. I still have it that I got for Christmas in 1993.
Nice.
And
even if they ripped off Voltron to do that.
Yeah, pretty much. But also, kind of what you're talking about with Are You Afraid of the Dark being like really kind of freaky even for kids. So after they got so much success, they decided to bring in an actual an American original villain, which was Lord Zed. He was not part of the Japanese footage. What a terrifying looking villain they brought in, because Lord Zed. Yeah. Okay, imagine this. If you haven't, before you Google it, listeners, if you don't know what Lord Zed looks like, okay, imagine a man with no skin, just bare muscles, with like an exoskeleton, like metal exoskeleton around him, and a horrifying like mesh metal face mask. And he's like, "I'm Lord Zed." I can't do the voice, but it's like that, but actually scary.
No, Brian, that was plenty scary enough, but for a different reason. We're all
It's
worried
like,
about you now.
it's like this is a show for 6-year-olds. Let's make a skinless man. And at one point, they even make a joke that he may have been human, and then they got the skin ripped off of him by the Zeo crystal. So
That old joke.
yeah.
Hey, I got a joke here.
Well, the joke was they say that only someone who's good can touch it, and then Rita says, "Yeah, Zed tried to touch it, and look at his face."
What's red and metal and had his skin ripped off? Zed.
I mean, it was inescapable. It was everywhere to the point where, like in first grade, me and another kid were pretending to be Power Rangers in the lunch line, and I accidentally kicked him in the face because I got a little too close, pretending to kick him in the face.
That's fair. And now bringing that up, just a reminder that you're now watching Cobra Kai, so you're going to see a lot of that.
Yep.
Kids getting kicked in the face in high school. There you go.
Yep. I have. So if any of you are caring about my TV watching, I finished Chuck. I finished Firefly. I'm on to Cobra Kai now.
So rest easy, guys. He got through them.
I'm sure you're worried. Not that Matt's rewatching any shows that I've suggested. I'm now on the third show that Matt suggested.
I really appreciate that. That's awesome. I'm finishing Oscar movies, and I'm finishing up the Godzilla and Kong series, and then so I can watch Godzilla vs. Kong because you can't just jump into that.
Yeah.
So I've got so much stuff to watch, and I want to watch IT Crowd because I liked the episode that I saw, but man, there's just so many things to watch right now.
All right. Well, Matt, I have to stop myself. I could easily keep going and going and going talking about Power Rangers, but what do you got? What else you got?
Sounds good. I'll hit a couple live action shows for myself. Now I watch some with my parents. There's a lot of TV that I watch with my parents, so these might not be aimed at kids. They're kid friendly, but they're not specifically aimed at kids. So there's one I'll land on, but I watched with my parents. I watched Quantum Leap. Now, that was a little bit before my time, so I don't remember a whole lot of episodes of Quantum Leap, but I think I remember I was a little bored when I would watch it because it was just a little too advanced for me as a kid. But I know that I loved Scott Bakula, and I loved, Ed, I think was the side character who would pop up and was the one behind him traveling everywhere. I also watched Star Trek Voyager as a kid. Now, that one I liked a little bit more. And I've talked about Star Trek Voyager before, actually even a couple episodes ago. What else did I watch? Touched by an Angel. Did you ever watch Touched by an Angel?
I can't say I did.
So that was a show that it was the same thing every single episode. Oh, this person has a problem. Here's angels from heaven. They're going to introduce themselves into their life, and then at some point they're going to go, I am an angel, and there's going to be a light shining from high up on them. Like, don't worry, I'm here to, if angels really identified themselves to people as much as they did in this show, no one would be like, I don't think angels and God exist. They'd be like, dude, I had a roommate who was an angel for a couple of years, and then he left. So then they brought in the angel of death at some point in the show. And so there's now everyone that gets touched by an angel is also going to die, because apparently the angel of death has to be a recurring character. So everyone had to deal with that.
Death was also a recurring character on Supernatural, and his thing was he loved greasy pizza.
This angel of death touched by an angel did not love greasy pizza, to my knowledge. And then, so this is what I wanted. The show that I loved as a kid that really shaped a lot of my humor, because it was just like my dad's humor, was Home Improvement.
Oh, I watched this, yeah.
That was such a fun show. I really liked Tim Allen's humor. I still like his humor nowadays. I don't watch his shows as much. I watched a little bit of Last Man Standing. Tim Allen, he's the type that, he's just like Tommy from Power Rangers. It's just I'm going to keep playing my hits. I'm going to keep cycling back to the stuff that I was famous for in the past. So he's constantly self-referencing. Even in Home Improvement, after he was in Toy Story, there's a scene where they're babysitting a kid, and then Randy is played by I think it was Randy.
Yep, it was
Jonathan
Randy.
Taylor Thomas. Okay. Yeah, Jonathan Taylor Thomas's character is there and like he's playing with him too. And like, well, why don't you play with this? And he brings out like the baby Simba doll or something and is like, you should play with that. And Tim Allen's there is like, I think you should play with this. And he brings out a Buzz Lightyear doll. And so they were like joking about that back and forth.
Yeah, because Jonathan Taylor Thomas was Simba as well.
Yes, yeah, and then as we know, Tim Allen was Buzz Lightyear, and it was just such a fun show. I
Mm-hmm.
thought I mean, again, it was the '90s, so every show did this where it's like let's do the same thing over and over. So every show was somehow there's some family drama. Usually, it's brought on by Tim messing up. At some point, he has to get advice from Wilson. Every now and then, Jill would be the one who'd make the mistake, or every now and then it would be
Mm-hmm.
either more in the wrong. It was just how do we even parent because of our kids? They're going through something, but there'd be Wilson every single episode with just some sort of ancient trivia or
Yeah.
some historical folklore that he'd bring up that would just solve
Yeah.
the problem.
And I think Wilson kind of paved the way for Mr. Feeney as like the neighbor who will give you advice at the fence.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Wilson, I liked more. It's hard to say. Okay, I like Feeney just as much as Wilson, but as far as like the giving advice at the fence, Wilson beats it for sure.
Yeah, and I like Wilson's gimmick. I like you don't get to see his face; you just see the eyes poking over the fence.
Mm-hmm. They did a cool homage to Wilson in Last Man Standing because this was like the ultimate Tim Allen referencing himself. Tim Allen comes as his character from Home Improvement. Like Tim Taylor comes to like it's like Tim Allen and Tim Allen in the same scene. It's like his Home Improvement character comes to do work at the house of Mike Baxter, who is his other character. And at one point they're talking, and there's like an electrical box door where he only sees half of his own face, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I had a neighbor Wilson who passed away because the actor passed away like a long time ago, and I used to miss talking to him." And like that they would have gotten Wilson to come back if he still been alive to make a guest appearance.
Yeah, because they've brought back a number of other characters from his other shows, and Home Improvement have been on there. I really liked. I don't think anyone expected to like him as much as they did because he was not a series regular in the first season. But Richard Karn as Al, he was just such a delight. He had this charisma as Al, like this guy that he's kind and he's supportive and he actually knows what he's doing, and he can be the brunt of the joke. Like he shouldered so many jokes aimed at him with such a grace and a hilarity, and so you really enjoyed seeing Al on that show, and I'm glad that they made him a bigger part of it as it went on. But if you haven't watched Home Improvement, I think it's on Hulu. Angie and I started rewatching it like forever ago, and then we got sidetracked with other shows. So we only made it through the first season.
Most of the series is saved on my DVR, so if you want to come to my house and watch it on the DVR,
you might have to help him move a stove.
Yeah. Yep. That's a very inside joke.
That's what we do. We do visual gags for the other person. We make inside jokes. This isn't about anyone else, Brian. It's about you and me.
You know what else it's about?
What?
It's about trivia.
It's about trivia. All right. Last week, I don't remember how I phrased this trivia question, but we talked about Parks and Rec last week. We talked about how there was one episode where they had to change the location that they were filming in order to adjust for a movie that was also filming. Now, that episode was the one where they go to London. And the reason why they were doing that in London is because in London, they were filming Guardians of the Galaxy. And Chris Pratt had to get taken off the show for just a little bit of time so that he could finish filming that. So they needed an excuse. So that's why they popped over to London and filmed it there. And so if you watch that episode, you'll see some inside jokes that they make about it, about like how Chris Pratt got into a better shape for it. And they even have one of the characters from Parks and Rec. He's also a guest star. One of the characters from Guardians of the Galaxy guest star on Parks and Rec. So that's the answer.
Also, Matt, we didn't answer your bonus trivia from a few episodes ago, which was that Steven Spielberg was the executive producer of Animaniacs.
That's right. Yeah. And if you don't know that, then you never watch Animaniacs, because I think they're very self-referential about it, especially in the episode of the new reboot. He's actually a voice on there for a scene.
Oh, nice. So I actually have two trivia questions, one based on Matt's one of Matt's picks and one based on one of my picks, but they're both too good not to have be our trivia.
Okay.
Number one, for Power Rangers, there was, the 1985, he had Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie. And one of the characters in the movie was called a character called Dulcia, which is a total Xenon Warrior Princess ripoff. This woman in this. I don't know how they got this clear for a kids movie, but she's basically wearing a bikini and kicking butt on this alien planet. Now, originally, this part was played by a very famous actress, and then they ended up firing her for some reason and recasting her, so you don't see her in the actual movie. But the original Dulcia has gone on to star in a very successful TV show for over 20 years. So who is the successful TV actress who originally was jumping around with the Power Rangers in a bikini?
What a way to phrase that.
It's true, though. Do you know this one, Matt?
I don't. I'd have to look it up. Or I'd have to ask you, I guess.
Yeah. And Matt mentioned that Jonathan Taylor Thomas did the voice of Simba in Lion King. But did you know the singing voice of Simba is another actor who was on an ABC sitcom? Do you know that one either?
He just can't wait to be king. Yep. Nope. But I know he's not white.
That is true. He is not white. He is he was on a black 90s ABC sitcom, and he did the singing voice for Simba. So
I wish my singing voice was biracial. Yeah, you got nothing. You got nothing.
Here's a bonus one that I'm just going to give the answer to. Jason Marsden, who he's a guy who shows up in a lot of ABC shows in the 90s. He did the voice of Max in a Goofy movie. Oh, singing voice for Max was actually one of the Bash brothers from the Mighty Ducks.
Was it?
Yeah. The big tough guy who's clearly like 30. He's like, yeah, I'm a high schooler. Like that guy.
I had that was floating around in the back of my brain somewhere. I think I knew that because it's familiar, but it's still surprising. So,
all right. Well, if you know these answers, or if you just want to talk to us in general, TV Guys 1 on Twitter, TV Guys on Facebook, TV Guys Podcast at gmail.com. And Matt's going to tell you what we're doing next week.
Or my phone number, which is 402. No. I'm not going to give it out on here, but you probably know me, so feel free to send me a text. And if you don't know me, send us a message on Facebook or Twitter, and maybe I'll get back to you. Hey, next week, we actually, you know what? I'm going to tell you because we know what we're doing for the next couple weeks. So we're going to give you a sneak peek in the week after that, too. So next week, we're going to talk about moms because we're getting close to Mother's Day. By the way, this is a great warning. If you are a guy out there, you usually wait until the day before. Tend to, or if you're like me, and I'm guessing if you're like Brian. So get your Mother's Day present now. Do it right now. This is your warning. You've got a week and a half. Get it now. All right. So we're going to talk about our top TV moms. There's some great TV moms out there. So if you guys have some suggestions too, like you better talk about this woman, then we will. And then the week after that, we're going to talk about the most realistic shows. So what shows are based in reality, but just the way things play off, you're like, this would never actually happen in real life. There's some really egregious examples Brian and I will talk about.
Definitely. Yeah. So you're talking about getting Mother's Day gifts. One year, I completely forgot that it was Mother's Day until they mentioned it at church. And so then I stopped at Wendy's on the way home and got my mom a large Frosty because now she likes those. And that was my Mother's Day gift to her.
That's nice. Good for you. I did one. No, this was Easter, like a couple years ago that I did for Angie. Now I didn't forget about Easter. I knew it, but like I decided for Easter basket because she wasn't wanting like candy that year or something like that. I got her a couple of avocados and I threw it in her Easter basket. And my mom thought that was the funniest thing ever. Plus, she was a little jealous. And Angie's like, "No, this works. I like avocados." Yeah. So she enjoyed that. It was a fun Easter.
All right. Yep. So we're doing moms and unrealistic worlds.
That's it. Not at the same time. We'll do it one after the other. So if you have other ideas for episodes, just let us know because we've done some episodes that you guys have suggested, and we've gotten some people who are like, I really liked this show, or I really like this episode. So let us know. Until next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
I'm reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.